Pacers win again, this time taking down the Atlanta Hawks right here in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Their best guys are all good. They are winning a lot of clutch games and so many notes from around the league and the trade deadline to get to. You'll get it all right here on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Sunday/weekend, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name is Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and Circle City Spin, and today I am in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. People are clapping about a high school basketball game. Perhaps you can hear it, and we have a lot to discuss. The Pacers beat the Hawks. They're low-key playing pretty well. It's 7 out of 12 wins for the 7 wins in their last 12 games, for the Pacers, with 3, I believe, of their losses coming in games where they had second-half leads. They're playing well. They beat the Hawks again, and crunch time play has been much better of late. We'll talk about the ending of this game. A crazy game. 2 completely different halves of basketball, how they got it done. Lots of notes about various players. And then, of course, as we do, we'll get through the notebook, talk a little trades. An actual trade happened in the NBA after this game, but before I start recording, so we can talk about that and how it's Pacers applications and things of that nature. Okay, let's just talk about this game. And I think the place to start is the start, but only kind of, because this game really flipped at halftime. And yet early, you really quickly saw what the Pacers' issue was going to be that they had to solve at some point in this game. The Hawks were getting anywhere they wanted. It was 6-5. 6-5 Hawks. Game had just started, and I thought, oh boy, the Pacers' defense right now looks rough. They are not keeping any Hawks players away from anywhere. The Hawks had 20 points in 5 minutes, under 5 minutes to start this game. Halfway through the first quarter of this game, the Pacers were shooting 70% from the field. Great number. Good job, Pacers. They were 14% worse than the Hawks at that time, who were shooting 84% from the field. Unbelievably poor defense from the Pacers early in this game as the Hawks just kind of ran away with it. And at halftime, the Pacers had 80 and the Hawks had 73, which, by the way, 2 weeks ago to the day, the Pacers scored 78 in a full game. Granted, a way different version of the team, but like comical how bad the defense was for both teams in the first half. And we just all saw collectively the Pacers go into Atlanta and score pretty easily for 2.5 quarters and then fall apart from a 15-point lead and blow it. And so they were scoring very well. They were up, again, they had 80 first half points, but I thought, man, if the Hawks just clean up their defense like they did in Atlanta, this one's over. The Pacers have to defend better. They have to summon something, even with their offense being this sensational. I mean, they were 80 points is a ton. It feels weird that I'm talking about the Pacers leading and yet still being kind of like on their chances of winning at halftime. But in the second half, they flipped everything. They were awesome to start the second half because there was just a massive, massive turnaround out of nowhere. But their defense was way, way, way better to start the second half. Rick Carlisle, we talked to him post-game, he said at halftime of the game, they go in the locker room, they watch no film, right? All they do is talk about how defense, they need to be more physical, they need to be more stout, they need to keep guys out of the lane. And it was very obvious immediately that those changes were happening, right? The Hawks defense also stunk. And so the Pacers upping the intensity on that end really changed the game. Like, for example, in the third quarter, there was one drive where Aaron Nesmith catches it on the right wing. He does one little shake around his defender. There's no Hawks players in the lane, right? It was that easy for the Pacers to score. All they had to do was up their defense and they were going to win this one. And they really, really did at halftime. In the first half, the Hawks scored 73 points, like I mentioned. In the second half, they scored 51. And it wasn't even like I would watch this game back and go, wow, what a massive schematic change. I think a lot of this was lineups, which I'll get to in a second, but a lot of this was just that will to and want to kind of stuff. They were much better keeping Jalen Johnson away from the basket, keeping Nickeil Alexander-Walker away from the basket, and the Hawks offense is just very good. They move the ball better than anyone. I think they're like third in the last 20 years in assists or something crazy. They're very good, but it requires a lot of player and ball movement and rim pressure to actually do that. And the Pacers did a great job of limiting all that, and they really turned it up in the second half in a very meaningful way. Some honest-to-God defense out of nowhere. And so even as, naturally, after an 80-point half, the Pacers settled in terms of their scoring in the second half, they could keep the Hawks away by playing the opposite game of the first half, where they outscored them a bajillion to a little less than a bajillion. Their defense really ratcheted up, and I honestly think every single player who played deserves some credit for that. Not a lot of stinker defensive nights for really anybody today. Ironically, the guy I thought was, compared to his usual level, worse defensively, is a good defender who we'll talk about in a minute. But some of it is that it's will, it's want to, and guys talked about that post game, right? It was very like sometimes I think that that's just wishy-washy player talk after a game. In this game, you could see it. Like, that really is part of what happened. And the Hawks did it too. To their credit, they were better on defense in the second half. That's just kind of how the game flowed. But another thing happened in this game that was meaningful, and that is what happened before the game. The injury report, no Kristaps Porzingis for the Hawks, and Onyeka Okongwu in their last game in Boston. No, maybe one. They played one since then. The Rockets, whatever. He got elbowed really bad in the face, or got hit in the face, and he lost a bunch of teeth, and he had to have surgery. And so he was unavailable. So they were very small in this game. They have Mo Gay playing some center, but he's like kind of center, kind of not. And Christian Koloko is their other center. Koloko was very good the last time these teams met a week ago, but he's a two-way player. Like, they can have some inconsistency. And so their rotation, the front court was different, right? Reese Shea was back. Johnson was playing the five sometimes in this game, right? It was just a very different group than the one the Pacers saw a week ago. And so even though last week Jay Huff played 3 minutes in that game, right? They started small. They got a lot of ball movement out of that and player movement. Their offense looked pretty good, but their defense really struggled. This game, they needed less of that offensive stuff and more of that defensive stuff. And so in the second half, not that it was a huge change because Furphy didn't play a ton in the first half either, but in the second half, they turned to way, way, way more minutes with a 5 on the floor. I think Jay Huff, every single minute he played in the second half was consecutive, like no one subbed him out, and he played 18 minutes in the second half, 17:57. He was in the game a ton. No Isaiah Jackson and no Micah Potter in the second half, and Furphy only played 5 minutes and 21 seconds. Obviously, Siakam is technically playing some center in that stretch, but that was a big change for the Pacers from their last game against Atlanta, and even from the first half of this game. In the first half, Furphy played 7.5 minutes. Isaiah Jackson played 6 minutes. We'll talk about him. And Jay Huff played 13. And then in the second half, they realized the way the matchups in the game was flowing, they needed more Jay Huff. And Huff was playing well enough, importantly, on offense for that to happen. He made 3 twos. He made 3 of his 8 threes. He had 6 rebounds. This was one of his better, I thought, actually like fighting for boards, rebound games of the season, and his usual 2 blocks. And so Jay Huff, in a game that the Pacers win by 5, is a plus 10 in 31 minutes. Not that he hasn't played like a ton of games of high minutes this season, but usually if Jay Huff is approaching or exceeding the 30-minute mark this season, it's because he's just lights out, can't miss offensive stuff this year. That was, I think, his second most minutes played in a game this year, and it's usually for other reasons. In this game, it was because they needed to change their lineups in a way that would help their defense and make this game more manageable for them, and they did. I don't recall Huff. Yes, that is the second most minutes that he's played in a game this year, the third time he's played over 30 minutes, and in his 5 most minute games, they're 4-1, and that is not what people think. Every time some stat like that comes out, everybody says, well, wow, Jay Huff should obviously be playing more. What that is saying is when Jay Huff plays well enough to be on the floor a lot, the Pacers usually win. Good center play is very helpful, and good center play was helpful in this game. The Pacers got a lot of good play to Jay Huff, and they won the game. And I thought that was an important shift, is just tweaking their rotation in the second half. Small ball has been somewhat effective for them, but you've seen the leakage of that the last 2 times they've tried it, where they can get sideways. And in this game, it certainly did, and Huff was a huge part of things changing for the better in the second half on both ends of the floor, right? His defense is obviously what it is, especially for a Hawks team that's trying to get downhill, but his offense, when he's making shots, when he's effective around the basket, things of that nature, the Pacers can really, really be solid. Now, the other part of that flip is that, look, Johnny Furphy has been wonderful. Obviously, everybody knows how good he's been of late. Among his worst games in a while, right? He just, Jalen Johnson had moved him easily. He couldn't find a defensive matchup that worked for him. 3 turnovers. The shots were not falling at all. Furphy was -9 in his 13 minutes in this game. This was really, really poor for him. Almost invisible. I have very few notes about him, but it was clear like right away that he was not playing well and they needed to shift something there. And so he didn't play as much, and that's fine. They need to figure out the front court combos, what they do and don't work against. That's important for next year too. But Furphy did not have it at his usual or recently showed level in this game, really on either end of the floor. And so small ball was just as much about, tall ball in this game was just as much about not having that on the floor as it was about Huff's actual success. And the other lineup shift that mattered a lot in this game, and I'll talk more about this player's individual play. Actually, I'll just do it now. As we keep going here, is that Jarris Walker played fine, I would say. He played 26.5 minutes and had a double-double, which is hilarious. I'll talk about that too. But he also felt just a little more invisible and floaty than he has in recent games. It took him 12 shots to score those 11 points, whereas Ben Mathurin was crushing the little things in this game. Ben Mathurin had 14 points on 6 shots, and so he played 32 minutes in this game, and they got back to their starting lineup for at least some portion of the season of Nembhard, Mathurin, Nesmith, Siakam, Huff, and that was the group that was good in this game. They have reps together, they were defending well, and they were doing enough to keep the Hawks away. And so a rotational shift in the second half was just as important as the classic, all right, everybody play harder and guard the man. And Ben Mathurin played most of his minutes in the first half, or over half of them, but he was very good in this game in a way that was meaningful, in that he did a lot of the little things that Ben Mathurin does in his best games. What I mean by that is obviously he can go off for 30 at any given time. That's what makes everybody so infatuated by his occasional ceiling. But like his first points tonight were him cutting into the lane and lurking for an offensive rebound, right? And that is something that no one mentions enough, including me, about him. He can really rebound, right? That's one of his best skills as a perimeter player compared to other perimeter players, obviously scoring very high up there. And then he had a dart to Ben Shepherd in the corner on a drive for a three. He threw it before the defense stepped up and blocked him in the lane. He had 7 points, 2 rebounds, and 3 assists really early. Like everything felt right in the way he was processing the game and attacking, and that carried over to the defensive end. And then he closed the first half instead of Jarris Walker. I wonder if the way that they're playing now, where they're playing small to start games, if they would ever do that. But he was playing really well. He had a great read to the corner in the second half in transition too, but like right when he threw it, Ben Shepherd tried to cut. I never know who's at fault for those. If the guy passing doesn't look at the right time, if the guy cutting shouldn't have cut, maybe it's both, maybe it's neither, whatever. But like he made a lot of reads like that in this game where I thought, okay, that was a very good Mathurin game in ways that aren't just him filling up the scoreboard, but 14 points on 6 shots is awesome, right? 8 free throw attempts in a game with a medium number of free throws is very significant. That led the Pacers and made his night extremely efficient. So he deserves a lot of credit for playing that way. And so, look, you score 80 points and a half. Offense is a big part of the story of your game. They had 3 20-point scores, and I've barely talked about that at all. But I thought the reason the Pacers won this game is what I described. Their defense improved significantly right when it needed to in this game. They made smart rotational shifts and got to a lineup that has worked for them before and certainly worked for them in this game. And guys who needed to produce in ways that they don't normally produce, in this case, Jay Huff and Ben Mathurin, both did so, with Huff with some inside the arc game, some defensive stuff, and to his credit, being able to play through a situation that requires a lot of conditioning. He played like 4 minutes against the Hawks last week and then played 17 or 18 in a row in the second half today. And Ben Mathurin for crushing all the little things that everybody, including the Pacers, has been wanting him to do more and more and more of every single night. They were both very good, and the Pacers were very good. And they won their 7th in their last 12. Let's get to the notebook and talk about some other players in this game, including the actual scoring leaders, and then some notes from around the league, some Giannis stuff, some Sixers stuff that I think is important, the trade that happened last night, why it matters for the Pacers, and the last talk of Siakam All-Star before it becomes official. It's all coming here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. But first, everybody, I got to talk to you about Prize Picks. The big game is almost here. There's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And this week, Prize Picks has a special max discount for the big game. Live in the app right now, Drake May just needs 1 passing yard for the max discount to win. Add another player to your lineup, and if your picks hit, you can cash in. Prize Picks is super simple to use. It takes no time to get started. The whole format is clean. Pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections. It makes watching games even more fun, because every drive and every stat matters. The social feed feature is awesome. You can share lineups and even copy lineups from winners with 1 click, and you can follow Prize Picks partners and tailor fade picks right from the feed. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That code is LOCKEDONNBA for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it is good to be right. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Make your second listen. Locked On Hawks. Brad Rowland will have the other side of this game as the Hawks lose another game that they should probably think they should win. Or Locked On Cavs, Bulls, or Kings. Another 3-team trade. Of course, the Bulls and Kings traded again. How does this keep happening? We'll talk about that in a second because it is Pacers adjacent, I would say, for the show. Okay, amazingly, I did that whole first segment without talking about their top scorers. Pascal Siakam with 25, Aaron Nesmith with 23, Andrew Nembhard with 26. That's all awesome. They were all very efficient as well. It combined 19 for 25 for Siakam and Nesmith. They were just special on offense in this game. And Andrew Nembhard was 9 of the Pacers' first 11 points or something. He was really setting the tone early. I thought getting around the court wherever he wanted, 9 of their first 11 to be exact. He had 15 points in the first quarter. And I keep putting this in my notes when he plays well. I remember what you all said about Andrew Nembhard earlier this season. I remember. And I've been massively higher on him than basically everybody for a long time. But he's playing awesome basketball late. And late in the game, close game, the Pacers turned it over. Alexander Walker racing ahead in transition. I believe it would cut it to 2. And he shoots out of a cannon and gets back and fouls him before he can get the layup, and then he missed one. Huge recovery and a big play from Nembhard, who was just fantastic. The other two were just really good. Aaron Nesmith had that drive I mentioned earlier, and he had another drive from the baseline where he got into the basket and then just muscled his defender out of the way so he could get under the rim. He's added way more strength to his drives. I think that's made them actually successful. He made 5 twos in this game. 3 for 4 from deep is obviously very helpful. And look, Siakam, especially with all these front court talents out for the Hawks, if he's starting effectively at the 5, he just had a lot of room to operate, right? He had good defenders on him for much of the night, but the way the Pacers were playing and moving the ball, and to their credit, they described it as Pacers basketball, the way the ball was moving, the way the pace was there. You could feel it. That gave Siakam some in-the-flow kind of reps that he's just incredibly good at, right? He was awesome in this one, and right before All-Star, we'll get to that later. Those 3 were just all simply fantastic, right? And so in a game where they needed to be good, they were, and it really mattered in crunch time. Pat Boylan was on this podcast talking about how one of the defining traits, and he was right, about the Pacers early in the season was that they stunk in clutch games. They could not win close games. Since then, they're 3-0. They beat the Thunder and Hawks and Bulls in close games. They're just getting better at closing and playing their way. It doesn't feel like they change the way they play to fit the game or score. They just keep playing, and it's really working for them. And in this game, they held off the Hawks once again. So very, very impressive stuff from those guys. A couple notes I want to get to before talking about some around the league kind of stuff. Jay Huff hit corner threes in this game, and he is not a corner shooter. He made 2 in this game. He also finished a lob. I already talked about what made him effective and why he did stuff that he normally doesn't really do, but that was all very impressive. But he also had some negative stuff. He had another perimeter defensive moment where, look, Jalen Johnson is an all-star and a very effective player, but just completely cooked by him. And then he had an ugly turnover right after it. And then it was 115-114, a close game. And twice on the same offensive possession, Jay Huff is being told where to go by his teammates. Maybe the possession got messed up in some way, and he was actually not just sure what to do, or nobody was, but it was really bizarre how much they were pointing. Hardly noticed Jarris Walker in this game for a long time, which is hilarious because I typed that in my notes, and at the time I think he had 4 points. And I was like, man, like him and Furphy in the same game are kind of having their worst game in a minute. And then I look up and I don't even realize Jarris Walker has 10 rebounds. Like, what? Out of nowhere. Huge success for him on the glass to do that. He led the Pacers in boards by a lot, and I just didn't notice. That's on me. So I think that note was actually wrong. Right after I put that he felt a little more invisible, he had a 3, and then he scored 2 more times. So he scored 7 points in like a minute and a half to get there, and he finishes in a game that actually felt like a down game for him with a double-double. And that is actually the highest praise I can give him, is that Jarris Walker has played so well recently that, 1, now when he shoots threes, it feels like they're going to go in, and 2, when it feels like he's playing bad, substandard for his recent level, he ends with a double-double. So that's kind of a backhanded compliment, obviously, because I didn't feel like he was particularly awesome in this game, and he did take 12 shots to get to 11 points, but a huge game for him to get his first double-double in, and he just continues to, even on his bad games, produce a little bit. The center stuff, goofy, I suppose. That might be the wrong way to put it. Isaiah Jackson was the first center in the game, and did not do very well. I mean, he just got completely outworked on the boards on one possession by Gay and Jalen Johnson. He played 6 minutes on the dot, had 3 fouls. He's been really good on the glass recently in terms of his per-minute production there, but has not done enough elsewhere to earn more time. And 3 fouls was brutal for him. That's why they turned to Huff for so much. No Micah Potter at all. And it wasn't just him that had that happen. The Pacers got like beat in pathetic fights on the glass several times in this game. Really strange part of it because it was 51-39 in their favor on the glass. But the ones they lost were like, how on earth did they let the Hawks get those kind of ones? Last player, Ben Shepherd, had a very Ben Shepherd-y game in a way that he kind of needed. I felt like he'd had a few wobbly defensive games of late, but Rick Carlisle going out of his way to praise Shepherd late too. He was 3 for 6 in the field and made half his threes. But 1, he had the most Ben Shepherd play ever, diving for a loose ball between like 4 Hawks players, which was very impressive. He found his stuff late at the right time with some huge threes and huge rebounds. 7 rebounds, 3 assists for Ben Shepherd. Very atypical stat line compared to what he typically produces, adding in, like everybody really, adding in ways that they don't normally do. That kind of was the theme of this game for the Pacers in a way that you didn't really realize it until the game ends, and you see that almost a career high in rebounds for Shepherd, and getting close to his season high in assists. So he did a lot of things in this game that I thought were productive. And that brings us to the stuff I wanted to talk about on the show that doesn't really fit the game segment. So that, everyone, is Pacers Hawks. Okay. I got a tweet from somebody after the game, not a tweet, a post. It was not on Twitter. That was very fascinating that I would like to relay. I can't remember who it was from, but it was on Blue Sky. They said the Pacers started the season. They won 6 of 37. Oh, it's historical marker ahead. Thank you for that. The Pacers started the season winning 6 of 37, and they've now won 7 of their last 12. So clearly they're playing better, right? I described my reasons for thinking that. Obviously, the results are part of that earlier. They found something here, and I do acknowledge and will say that they like winning should not be their priority right now. If it happens, it happens. So it's an odd time for them to be picking up all these wins. Obviously, they're now fourth to last in the standings, fifth to last, whatever it is. They are winning. And now that I personally think that they have proven to me that, especially since New Year's, right? So since New Year's, they've played, I should have counted this before. I apologize. You have to see me now count games. They played 15 games in the month of January since 2026. They were ahead in the second half of 11 of those games, right? So they're playing well. They're competing with everyone. They obviously had a losing record. They went 7-8, but they're playing really well for like long stretches right now. And they're winning close games right now. And I think a 7-8 month, plus a few good games right after Christmas, I would add, even though the results weren't there on those. They were beating Miami in the second half. They were beating the Magic in the fourth quarter. I would personally think if I'm the Pacers, this is a long enough stretch to go, yes, if we were healthy this season, we would have been a halfway decent team, a play-in level team. That didn't happen, so they need to change their goals and their emphases at some point. But that has certainly been long enough for me personally to feel like that. Like I predicted they'd win 40 games this year, right? That's obviously not going to happen. But at least this is the framework. This last month is of like what exactly this could have looked like for the Pacers in a healthy season. Huge news in the NBA, 2 of which impact the Pacers, like very subtly. Paul George, 25-game suspension. Obviously, he's an ex-Pacer for a substance that he took. That is huge for the Sixers in their salary cap situation. It obviously would help them more to have Paul George play, to be clear, but now they're way closer to the luxury tax line because the money half the money not paid to him during the suspension doesn't count against the tax. So they are now a much more likely team to make a small salary dumping trade. And hey, look at that. The Pacers are certainly in position to take on money from another team. Eric Gordon, Trendon Watford, perhaps now even higher on the list of could be traded to the Pacers. I already have gone through all those teams. If you want to know, though, the close to the tax teams that I think could be good fits for the Pacers would be the Nuggets, the Suns, the Magic, and now the 76ers. There's just some stuff on those teams that make good sense to me to be moved. I thought there was another one, but for some reason my notes have just gotten so chaotically unorganized as trade season has gone on. But those all make sense to me as a smart thing for the Pacers to do, obviously, that close to the Raptors. There's the other one. That close to the tax line. So add the Sixers even higher up on that list for those two players. And I wrote a story for Circle City Spin of the stuff I've heard about the Pacers ahead of the trade deadline. I got a lot of comments like, this isn't new stuff. Yeah, it's not. It's stuff that I've heard. That doesn't mean it's new, but there was something I think was new, and no one had reported on. It seemed logical given what they did with Tony Bradley, but the Pacers are willing to use their distance below the tax to take in contracts like they could do with Philly to help them get under the tax, for example, and then get an asset along the way. You can read. I'll put that story in the comments. But anyway, that is actually a significant development for the Pacers. And the other trade that happened in the league, the Bulls, Kings, and Cavs, Dario Saric is in this. We'll talk about this trade in a second. But the Bulls in that trade got Dario Saric and 2 second-rounders for taking on his contract in the MLE. Like the Pacers could do something like that if they wanted to add some assets. I get not going early now if they think there's something they could do differently with their space, but that might be a trade to come back to after the trade deadline is over. And so that's of note. Also, Keon Ellis was in that trade. He's now going to be on the Cavaliers. He was a guy rumored to be connected to the Pacers, so cross that off the list, obviously. 2 more things to say really quick. I keep seeing people say a lot of the stuff the Pacers could do, they should wait until the summer. It'll be more advantageous for them to do it in the summer. And I don't quite get that. I'm not saying it's more advantageous to do it now or later. The opportunities will be different. But a lot of the people saying that to me keep saying it like, oh, there'll be better things for them to do in the summer. Why? Why will there be better things? And people keep saying, well, I think there could be better things. That's true. There could be. There could also be worse things, right? You know what's available to you now. You don't know what's going to be available later. You can always do multiple things in a row. So I'm not saying what is or isn't better. They have different realities now than they will in the summer. And there's some stuff that make more sense to do now. And there's some stuff that makes to do more in the summer. But there's not a better or worse timing. It's just what is available to you at a certain time. And the last note, after another healthily strong game from Pascal Siakam, who had 25, 6, and an assist, All-Stars will be announced on Sunday at 6 p.m. I believe that's going to be on NBC's broadcast later than normal. I'll state my own opinion. I think that as an individual, no doubter has been one of the best 10, 8 players in the Eastern Conference not even like up for debate for me. His stats match up with very few players in the league. Their record is bad. They are ahead of the Nets and the Wizards. That is it. And they're not even ahead of the Nets. I don't know why I said that. They're actually percentage points behind the Nets. They're ahead of just the Wizards, right, in the Eastern Conference standings. So it's very hard for a player that deep in the standings to make it, but he is an individual, has a good chance. My prediction will be that despite his great play, deserving it, he will not be named an all-star in the original 12 that are announced, but maybe he's a replacement. It depends on how many international guys that there are. He certainly deserves it, though, and I think if he does get it, it will be deserved. Just history says that teams weigh record a lot, and I think that that's going to hurt him. If he does not make it and Michael Porter Jr. does, that will feel insulting to me. He's been better than Michael Porter Jr., and those teams have basically the same record. So we will see where those things head. Tomorrow we'll talk about what happens with Siakam and his named or not named all-star situation. And then Rhett Bauer will join us for the third time of trade season. We keep doing this at key kind of benchmarks through the trade deadline process to talk about what's different since last time we talked and update some of our predictions for the Pacers at the trade deadline. So that will be really fun. Thank you all so much for listening today. We will see you very soon. You can find me on social media at Locked On Pacers and this podcast. You can find me on social media, at Tony Tyrese and this podcast at Locked On Pacers. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you very soon.